Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josie. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josie. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josie, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is mandatory musts when hiring contractors. The first and most important is to make sure you hire licensed and insured contractors. The contractors that need to carry a license are general contractors, electricians, plumbers, and mechanicals, better known as HVAC technicians. If you are hiring a carpenter to fix your baseboards, they do not need to be licensed, but they should have insurance. I make all my contractors sign the following 6 documents. Number 1, independent contractor agreement. The independent contractor agreement includes the amount agreed upon during the bidding process, time frame, 1-year warranty, services provided, and more. One item we include is a daily penalty for every day over their determined completion date. If they tell us the job will be completed by the 15th, we give them a little buffer, and then we will start to deduct $100 a day from their pay for each day they go over. Yes, things happen like, weather delays, for which we do not hold the contractor accountable. Number 2, scope of work. The scope of work is signed by both parties so it is completely clear what is expected to be done on the property. Number 3, indemnification insurance agreement. The indemnification insurance agreement basically adds you, the investor, to the contractor's insurance policy, which protects both parties. This is very common. All they have to do is call their insurance provider and add you to the policy, at no cost to you, during the length of the job. Number 4, payment schedule. The payment schedule is a list of milestones or benchmarks that must be met before payment is distributed. Number 5, W-9. A W-9 is a tax document that needs to be completed by anyone you pay more than $600 a year. It is super smart to get this signed in the beginning so you are not chasing down contractors at tax season. Ask me how I know. Number 6, lien waiver. A lien waiver is the only document signed at the completion of a project. It states that all work has been completed and paid for, including any material provided by the contractor. Always have the contractor sign this document before you give them their final payment. So, before you start your next project, make sure you cover all these mandatory musts before your project busts. Now, on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us Josh Johnson. Josh is the VP of DealMachine and leading the mission to give everyone the power of real estate investing. He is also a fellow podcaster with his new podcast, Here for the Art. Josh is a dog dad to Evelyn, and he lives a mile away from me. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. I couldn't believe we ended up living so close to each other and stumbled into each other the other week.
I'm telling you, it's crazy that here we are in the same industry and you are a total badass and just randomly met you. And I call you my Mecca mate because we met at the countertop at the Mecca restaurant in Raleigh. So, and I just randomly started talking to you and you're like, yeah, I work for this company called DealMachine. I'm like, DealMachine? So thank you for putting up with me and like, be on my podcast. So cool. So
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Give us a little background on you. We were chatting just a bit before the show but give me a background on you.
Yeah, I from St. Louis, Missouri. I went to Mizzou, M-I-Z for anyone listening.
Yeah, that's where my parents went. That's what we were chatting about. Both my parents are Mizzou grads.
excellent school. Big fan. My first years out of college, I was at an agency in like the content marketing world. Did sales and marketing for that agency. We ultimately published content online, and then I lived in New York for a year while building a sales office for that agency, and eventually made my way down to Raleigh about 7-8 years ago now. And have been there ever since, and have been throughout that time. Ended working at the agency, worked a year at like a tech content marketing company as well. That was just software to help manage that process. And then DealMachine had started a few months in like mid 2017. DealMachine had started by my two close friends, and I joined a little bit after that. We did a whole, I think, $1,000 in revenue the first month I was there. That was a very big milestone to hit. And so we've been growing DealMachine ever since. And really simultaneously with that is when I started doing some of my own real estate investing too, because of the tool that we made for it. And I just used DealMachine to make that happen. And so, yeah, that's my biggest, I think on the business side of the background.
So I got to tell you, I actually used DealMachine probably in 2018 when it was still very new. And basically, and this is my understanding of what it was back then, and I haven't used it since, to be perfectly honest, but I know it is amazing, amazing tool, and you guys are so successful. But you have an app on your phone, and when you're driving around and looking, it's basically what we call driving for dollars. And so you can be going through neighborhoods and see a house where there's, maybe there's mail coming out of the mailbox, or there is, long grass and overgrown, and it looks like maybe the house is vacant. So you can actually take a photo of the house. This is the coolest freaking thing ever. You take a photo of it, and then you can upload it and send it as a postcard. And that's what my experience was back in 2018. And I also got to say, I received a postcard from a property that we had just purchased. And they were saying, hey, are you thinking about selling this property? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's our house. That is the coolest freaking thing, that there's a picture of it on there. So it's all like geocoded. You can be in front of the house. It'll tell you who the owner is. You can put it in a queue, and it is just an amazing, amazing tool. So that's my understanding of it, but it has expanded to so much more. So tell us everything that DealMachine does now and why it's such a great tool for real estate investors.
Yeah, thank you. And definitely we are still most well known for like that exact function that you mentioned, like a driving for dollars and streamlining that process. If you used it back in 2018, your experience was actually significantly different than the experience of today.
I have
that
heard.
Was really almost all that we did. You could also skip trace and find like their phone numbers if you wanted to call them instead of do the postcard. But it was basically that. Today, like when you're driving, you've got the ability to like highlight properties on the map that maybe have certain criteria that you're interested in while you're driving. You could track your routes. You could actually plan a route to properties that you're interested in. Maybe you pulled a list of a certain type of motivation that you want to go door knock. So you could do things like that really easily right within the app as well. So again, certainly the ability to go out, drive, look for distressed properties. And that's why we started with that. One, it was David's story. It was how David started real estate investing. He built a really rudimentary version of DealMachine 1.0 for himself with no intention of ever giving it to anyone, because he had stumbled through what a lot of people starting out in real estate stumble through was, hey, I'm going to go look at the market and see if I can find any deals. Guess what? None of them worked. The numbers just didn't make sense. It's even worse today than it was back when he was trying to do it.
Oh yeah.
And then he started doing kind of like the very bulk, I just want to do like the absentee owner list in this zip code. And it failed because everyone's doing the same type of marketing and it's the same thing that everyone's doing. And so when we looked at, for people who are trying to start in real estate investing and out of like the blocks, you got to figure out what you can do a little bit differently than other people to try to stick out as real estate gets more and more competitive. And driving for dollars has always, in our experience and in talking to our customers and people who have been investing for years, been the best performing list, because as an investor making that list, there's distress. There's a reason that you might be able to help that homeowner. And a lot of times those physical distress indicators predate any time that they might hit like a foreclosure thing in a year. They might hit a divorce list in
Right.
6 months. We don't know that, but it's that early signs of distress, which is why driving one gives you information that no one else has. You know, there's a motivation point that you can help that owner because it's not a house that's ready to be thrown in the market. And you get in front of the future properties that might hit those lists in months or even years down the road. And so it's a list that performs really well. ROI, instead of needing 5,000 properties to market to, you need 500. And so when you're just starting, it's a much better way to do that because you might not have the budget to do marketing at that scale.
I love that. And I work with a lot of real estate investors who, are scaled their company, and they have a lot of people that work for them, and they actually use this tool, and they talk to their Uber drivers. They talk to, mail people who, are in the United States Postal Service, and we'll ask them, hey, if you ever see a property, can I put this app on your phone and, click on it and it puts it in a queue, or you can just hire assistants to go around and do this for you. And I just thought that was so genius because I remember when I was driving around, I felt a little bit like a creeper because there would be people like honking behind me, like, move it, lady. I'm like, shit, so it was just one of those things where I did feel like a little bit of a creeper, but
Yep.
It is like so systemized now from what I've heard that it's literally just like a click on your phone, or you can even, do it virtually as well, as what I've heard.
Yep. So that's a couple of really great call outs there. When in your experience in 2018, there was actually like a little plus sign bottom right of the screen. You hit that and said, I want to add a property. And then you like chose a spot on the map and then you added a photo. It was like a pretty a focused process. Like it probably took you a minute to do. Today, when you're on the map, we added what we just call tap to add. It is literally, I tap the button, the black dot that represents the property. We also put the address number below that so you can identify it really rapidly. You could tap it. And then if you don't want to take a photo, you don't have to. I do think that we've seen the marketing stands out when you take an original photo. We have Google Photos that get brought in. So if you just want to use a Google photo, or maybe you are just going to skip trace and call them where you don't need the photo as it's not as important then. So you can actually drive and add properties that much more quickly. We found I was capping out my routes like 25 to 30 properties an hour of drive time if I was taking the photo each time. If I'm using tap to add, I've done as many as 65 or 70 when I'm driving the right areas. And so when you also look at productivity of the drive time, that's a really big thing as well, to enhance that. So that's been massive, especially to your second point. The virtual driving is really interesting because I think even today we've seen like gas prices go up.
Oh yeah.
We've seen a lot of volatility in things like that are putting people more in a position where like virtual can make a lot of sense. And so we actually, for the longest time, had a Chrome extension that you went to Google Maps. In the Chrome extension, you would drive and you would tap a button in DealMachine in the Chrome extension, and it would add it into your DealMachine account. Today, that we brought all of that into DealMachine.com, the app. And so you're able to go to the map, click virtual drive, and then we pull up a side-by-side street view that you can click through, just like Google Maps. And then the actual kind of like top-down view of the map is on the left-hand side.
Oh, wow.
And so you can click through, tap any property that you want. Again, use the map highlights at the same time. So you're combining like absentee owner high equity with visual distress from the photo. And so you're able to get this super niche list of properties, and you can do that virtually anywhere. Because we see a lot of people who are just starting in real estate, they're like, I work a 9 to 5 and then I have kids, family things from like 5 until 8, and it's dark by the time I could even drive. And so it's a barrier for some people to be able to do and build that list. And so virtual driving is a way to make it even easier for people. And to some of the points that you mentioned, whether it's hiring for physical drivers or enabling like your network, where you could say, hey, like just join my DealMachine team, and then you can just tap property. If you're on the way to grocery store, you see a distressed property, you can tap to add it. So you can grow with like your network that way, or where we're seeing with a lot of people now with virtual, they're hiring VAs overseas who are able to come in and do the virtual driving inside of DealMachine for $3 to $6 an hour, depending on the person. And they're able to get the stress data for their whole area. The slight downside there is you obviously are working with the Google's photos, which in certain areas are very up to date, and other areas get anywhere from like 2 to 3 years out of date sometimes. So there's a caveat to it where the visual deal in front of you when you're able to do the physical driving is a really big thing. That was David's third deal, came from a property that a tree had fallen on, and it sat there for like 2 weeks. It was actually 2 doors down from one of his rentals. And it was because that tree fell on it and that she didn't take care of it with any sort of quick element, that it was clear, like, this is either vacant, there's something going on, like that, like normally this would have been off the roof like the day of. And so the physical element of driving, you get live data that you can't get virtually, because it turned out like that property said like owner occupied. It said it was like a medium equity property. And so it didn't have any indicators that this was a deal. But the fact that this thing happened and it wasn't taken care of was the indicator.
Right.
And it turns out she had been in Texas for 4 years and just never changed any of the data on it. And so you kind of stumble into things like that when you do driving, and you get huge deals out of it, because David wasn't competing in that example. Anytime you're driving, like, you're not competing against everyone that just bought the absentee owner list and sent the marketing out. You have your own niche list of properties that are very focused to what to yourself, and so you kind of get the disproportionate ROI then.
And I bet it's a lot more affordable to be able to narrow down your list and be able to just be very specific, because you've driven by, or you've had someone drive by, or someone has virtually looked at this property for you and done all the, research on it. But you have been talking about lists, and this was not part of the feature before, but you guys do provide lists at this point now, correct?
We do, yeah. So we full like minor history. In the past, when we first started, when you were with DealMachine, we paid to look up the owner every time someone added a property. It was like a nickel for us to do that every single time. After we were able to grow a little bit, we were able to go through the process of buying the data set on an annualized basis, so that it was updated. We've gone over periods of time where it was updated monthly and then weekly. Now we update every morning at 6 a.m. All of the properties in the entire database get updated, even the ones you've already added, not just like new properties. So your data is never out of date. But so once we had that list available and the data available, we had people telling us like, hey, like, I love using DealMachine for this. I like using your marketing. I want to use more of it, but I also know there's other types of data points that I do find valuable that I want to build lists on and I want to do marketing on. And so we built List Builder. It's literally just a second product that is offered inside of the same DealMachine system. Your experience is the exact same. It's just Driving for Dollars and List Builder are kind of two products that unlock the certain features that you see. And you're able to do, we've got at this point, I think it was 70 different filters, 700 different data points.
Wow.
On properties across the entire country. The coolest part, that's more of a recent addition in the last month and a half, we have full MLS data, expired listings, sales comps, and sales data, and then the ability to run it. We have a comps tool as well that you can do MLS level comps on every property across the country. And so you're able to use up the MLS data against all the tax record data, against like pre-foreclosure data, absentee owner data, things like that, to build lists of properties really rapidly. And then also like use on the MLS side, like if you're comping a property, once you're into a conversation, you can run that right away. And we're actually going to bring in MLS photos here. I believe we do 2-week dev sprints, and I think that's in our next sprint.
That's amazing, because I work with a lot of brand new students. I'm a coach for Homeschooled by Tarek El Moussa, and there are states, I think there's 7 or 8 of them, that are non-disclosure states. So those states in particular, I think Montana's one, maybe, just off the top of my head.
Montana, Missouri has various ones. Kansas has various ones. Texas, North Carolina has issues. I want to say New York. I think there's 13 are non-disclosure. And we've verified all of that. We have the MLS sales data in all of those states.
So, and for the listeners, if you live in a non-disclosure state, what that basically means is when you are going through using, say, Redfin or Zillow to kind of pull comps, you can't see that sold data. So through DealMachine, you have access to it. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep. We've got access to it. We've got it right within DealMachine. It's actually, technically the comps is a $20 a month add-on, but there's no limitations on it. Once you have that, you can run as many comps as you want. We might transparently too, I think we're going to go through like a repackaging in the next 3 to 6 months where we might make like a base level DealMachine plan that includes it. I don't know yet, honestly, like transparently, we're going to test a few things out, but yes, right within DealMachine, you have that available. And especially for new investors, it's like running comps is a really intimidating process because if you mess your numbers up, it doesn't matter how good you did everything else. Like you're going to get in deals that don't make sense.
Absolutely.
And so that power to see that dynamically immediately wherever you're at too, it's extremely easy on mobile too. It's honestly, one of my favorite things about our comp setup is it's actually pretty enjoyable to do. You pull up the map around the subject property. You can draw an area. So if you want to say like, you could do like default, like, hey, like a half-mile radius, but we all know like certain roads you cross, like it's not a comp anymore. And so you could actually trace out the exact area that you want to include the comps from with whatever criteria that you want, like plus or minus only like 200 square feet, sale date, all of those things can be used. And then dynamically, we just populate, here's the properties that fit the filters. You can select and deselect those. And then it spits out the average square footage of those. And then the comp value based off that square footage for the subject property.
I love that there's a map feature because I'm such a stickler about choosing my comps because, I mean, even when we listed our house last year, if you do a half-mile radius search, which what most of these MLS listings or whatever that they do, it's going to pull from across a major highway or something. So I love that DealMachine can do that and actually select a very specific neighborhood. That is so cool because again, like that's how I train my students. I'm like, do not trust these computer generated comps because you could really get your ass kicked sometimes, when you're going to determine your after repair value. So wonderful feature. Josh, this is amazing. What other cool things about DealMachine? Is there more?
I mean, there's certainly more. The last thing I'll say on comps is I 100% agree. And our approach again is we are trying to give everyone the power of real estate investing. And so it almost feels like a cliche thing to say, like, oh, like it's just like a fun brandy thing to say. But the reality is that is our mission. And something like comps is an intimidating process for a new person. And so our goal is like, how do we boil this down to where it is easy for them to know you shouldn't take the comp from across the highway. It is easy for them to choose the exact area. And it's obvious about that in the product design itself. And so that's honestly one of the hardest parts about how we develop is what's the person that doesn't know anything about real estate investing need at this moment right now to know what to do. And so the comps feature in particular is just such a fun tool to use, and you kind of learn about comping as you use it. So it's like an educational experience in addition to just, hey, I need this reference point. So it's really, really cool from that perspective.
I love that.
In terms of some of the other things that we've got, so again, driving for dollars, our bread and butter, what we're known for, literally still 85% of the people that come into our website, I was gonna say walk in the door, come to the website are like, I'm here to drive for dollars. List builder, like we said, you just pull lists at scale. It actually uses the same mapping, like tracing element that the comps tool uses. You use in list builder. So if you want to get a really targeted niche list of a neighborhood or a zip code, you use the same thing, or you can just use filters like zip code and just pull everything. So those are all really cool things. Some other things to think about, mail sequences. And so when we first launched, you could repeat the same mail piece every X number of days, a total number of times. There was no customization in different mail pieces along the way, and you couldn't vary the length. And so one of the things that we know is real estate deals can happen, like typically will happen over 7 to 13 touch points of marketing.
Right.
We see about 15% happen on the first one of the deals that come through DealMachine, 15%. By about the third one, 47% come in the first 3 postcards, but the next 53% come in like the next 7. And so you have to repeat that. And the reality is too, different sellers will respond to different types of mail pieces. And so you might have everything lined up, the right lead, the right need by them. But if you happen to only send a piece of mail or marketing that maybe that seller just isn't likely to respond to, you might miss out on the deal, even though the lead's there in your list and you're doing the marketing. And so mail sequences allows you to change the types of pieces along the way. So you could send the photo postcard that we mentioned. you can actually do a totally custom postcard. We have a blank canvas option where you can just from a blank canvas do anywhere from a 4x6 up to a 9x11 postcard. So you can do really big pieces. We have ballpoint pen letters that actually are machines that write the letters for you. So you can get this very touch point process with mail sequences, build that once, and then just put all of your properties on it. And you never have to come back and worry about it. You can just say, I know like that property was distressed because we update our data daily. You'll also know if they sell, so you can remove it from your marketing and not spend unnecessary marketing. And then you're getting different types of touch points along the way. So you're giving yourself the best chance of converting that seller and meeting them where they're at, wherever that happens to be, and the type of things that they like to respond to.
I love that option of being able to make my own postcard because I'm very particular. I have been using other CRMs and list generating tools where they have the most ridiculous sample postcards in there that say urgent notice, call us today. And if I got something like that in the mail, I'd be throwing it in the garbage. So I do like that you have that feature that you can upload your own. That is awesome. So I love doing direct mail. I like people to call me, but I know there are several people out there that like to do the cold calling or do the text blasting. Is that another aspect of DealMachine? Do you offer those tools as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So skip tracing exists in DealMachine. You can do it. And the coolest part, I'll say this about mail and skip tracing, everything we do is also on a one-to-one level. You could do it in scale. Like I got a list of 5,000 I need to send mail to. Awesome, that works. But you can do it just if you're driving one day and you find one property, you don't have to wait to build this big list to go to a mail house, which is an experience that people still have with a lot of like systems out there. Is they're like, unless you're going to send 500, like they don't support it.
How much are your postcards, by the way?
They start at 55 cents. Okay. They drop to 49 cents on our elite plan. Certain customers of ours that come to us and say, hey, like I'm going to do $20,000 of mail this month or over the course of X amount of time, we'll do custom packages with where we go as low as 42 cents. If you're commit to like a higher volume. So there's some flexibility we have in one-to-one conversations there.
Nice.
But the average member, when they start, they can do a one-off for 55 cents and it's full color print, front and back. It's sent typically same day, usually delivery time frames. Delivery time frames in general have slowed since COVID started. USPS got a lot slower. It used to be 3 to 5 days. I see 5 to 7, probably most frequently right now. But you get like a really good quality piece of mail one-off. To your other point, go back to skip tracing. Skip tracing to hunt down phone numbers, email addresses, or additional mailing addresses. You can do all of that as soon as you find an owner. You could actually skip trace them and call them from the driveway in seconds if you wanted to. We actually have a YouTube video from someone 3 years ago. We were filming content with them, pulled up to the first house. And he was like, "Oh, this looks like a good one. I'm gonna call it." As Quentin Flores is the guy. If you Google Quentin Flores DealMachine, you'll probably find this video. And the guy answered, and at first he was like, "Oh, I just signed a contract with someone else." And they was like, "Oh, it's not a deal then." And then he kept talking, and he was like, "Actually, I haven't signed yet." And they ended up getting a deal out.
Oh my gosh!
They went back and did the numbers, and this is before we had comps on demand. And they ended up getting a deal on it. It was so crazy. So you can do that, especially you might stumble across certain properties where you're like, the tree fell on it, but it's been there for 2 weeks. Right. I don't want to wait for a postcard, or it's very obvious. Like they probably might not respond to a postcard if the postcard's going to go to their home address and they haven't taken care of this. And so you can get a phone number and then you can call them. We don't, as of this moment, support calling. Like we don't have phone numbers in DealMachine. We actually had an bulk SMS product for 6 months. And we really saw like the writing on the wall of the direction that legislation is going against bulk SMS.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I cannot stand these random texts that I get or like the cold calling, et cetera. So I am so grateful to hear that you guys are respecting that from people who actually sign the do not call list and et cetera, all that. So you're making me love you even more, Josh. Keep going.
Awesome. I'm glad. It is. So basically we had this product and we killed it, which sucked because it was like $30,000 a month of revenue. And it was just like, we can't, like, we just, it didn't make sense long term to keep
Right.
it, and it wasn't the right move for long term, and it wasn't setting them up for success, because if someone's coming in, they build this business off SMS, and it just goes away, all of a sudden they're back to ground zero. And especially if they made investments off of that, like team members, it was a risk for them to do that. And so that was the decision that we made about a year ago, actually. So we do give you the numbers so that you could manually text them if you wanted to, or if you had another SMS software that you were still using, you could just export the data and send it wherever you needed it to go, and you can make that happen. And to your point too, we actually, every skip trace that we do, we spend about 7 cents to do the initial skip trace. And then we spend on average 4.9 cents on the numbers that we get back to add additional data to that number. And so, for example, if I skip trace someone, a lot of times you might be like, I got 5 numbers back and I just see numbers. That's all I know. We take it a step further. We actually take those numbers, we do caller ID lookups on them. So we give you the number that, not just what it came back with. A lot of times you might find like a relative's number, or just a number that maybe is out of date and it isn't theirs. So we do a live caller ID lookup immediately to tell you the name that's associated with the number. We do a do not call scrub against it, so you know if it's on the DNC list. We shadow it out if it is DNC, so you know that visually really rapidly, in addition to a tag on the number. And then we, when available, it's more rare, but if we know there's a relationship to the subject person being skip traced, we'll identify what that relationship is.
Wow.
So all of that comes with just innate into our skip trace. You don't have to think about it. A lot of people historically have like, okay, I'm going to skip trace, and then I'm going to go my DNC scrubber to do that. And then I'm going to do like maybe an additional like caller ID lookup. So it was like this 3-step, I'm going to do it, export the data, go somewhere else, do it, export the data, go somewhere else. And with us, it all just happens as instantaneously as you just skipping it to get a number on somebody.
This is so amazing. And I'm sure my listeners are like chomping at the bit here to find out how they can get DealMachine. So what's the easiest way for people to start using this tool?
Yeah, DealMachine.com is the domain. So you can go there and sign up. If you're on Android, you can technically sign up from the app too, but Apple makes it not as easy to do that. But the easiest thing is always DealMachine.com. Just top right is sign up for DealMachine, and you can get started. We do a 7-day free trial, so you can experience the software for yourself. You can test the data locally if you want, and you can get a feel for it without having to worry about committing out of the gates. Promo code Josh will give you $20 of free marketing credits to start with as well. And so promo code Josh, again, I'll try to say it a couple other times in case you missed it. Just my name, Josh, pretty easy. But it will give you $20 of marketing credits to start the process. So if you want to test out skip tracing, it's been a little while since I've done the math, but I think it's over somewhere between 14 or 12 cents on the lowest up to 17 cents is our skip trace price range. So you can do like a couple hundred skip traces that way, or you could send 40 or so postcards, send a sample to yourself to get a feel for what that looks like. All of that's built right in. And so you can do that with the free trial that you get as well.
That is so cool. I love freebies, and I'm sure my listeners are very grateful. So promo code Josh. Awesome. And thank you for sharing all of that about DealMachine. You heard me at the beginning of the podcast do a badassery bestowment. Do you have a badassery bestowment you can share with the listeners?
One like general idea is more so around a philosophy about when you're trying to do new things is like, don't overcomplicate your activities whenever possible. Because a lot of times, especially, this is, I think, not just real estate investors, but everyone tends to, when they don't know something, try to think about it in the most complex way possible. And they think about all the variables, they think about everything that could matter or be a factor. And the reality is, and I think the best example is with real estate investors, is what people do oftentimes getting into real estate is they get really consumed with education, which is super important long-term. Your ability to refine and be the best version of yourself as an investor is going to be critically tied to how you educate yourself and improve your skill sets over time. But your ability to start real estate investing is most directly tied to your actions that you take. Do you, in DealMachine, the example we use a lot is like, do you go driving and add the properties and then send the mail? those two things, more than anything else, are the simple ways to go about achieving your goal of getting your first deal or becoming a real estate investor. And so I think I really try to preach, I guess that element is like, just don't overcomplicate what your next step should be, and focus on simplicity and activities, and then know that over time, those simple activities are what yields the results that you need along the way. And then knowing that you have the kind of expert resources available to you when you need it, like following this podcast and doing this, listening to something like this while you're driving, and making sure you're aware of where you need to go get a solution to a challenge, versus like trying to figure out the solution to every potential challenge. That in a nutshell, I think, is the biggest thing.
Absolutely. And definitely do not want to overcomplicate things. I think that's fantastic. As far as education, we call that analysis paralysis. People, when they get into this business, they want to just study, learn, do everything. But just taking that first step and taking action is huge. So thank you for bringing that up. So the second half of the podcast is what makes Josh a badass, which you are. And I use the acronym BADASS. So the first letter is B, and I use the word book. What's a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
Yes. My favorite book I've ever read, business book wise, is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris Voss, if you guys haven't heard of this book, he was an FBI hostage negotiator for the better part of like 30 or 40 years. And so quite literally, all of his time was spent either in hostage negotiations or philosophically thinking about how to achieve results when you're negotiating with a party like someone who would have a hostage. And so it's literally his whole life has been spent thinking about how to negotiate, how to ask questions to achieve a certain result that you want, or get them on the same page and wavelength as you, even when potentially they feel like their motivations are fundamentally different than where you're at. And so it's like one of the only books that I come back to multiple times a year routinely. And I've got the hard copy, a softbook copy as well. And then I also have the audiobook, and I like literally occasionally will go on a run and be like, I need to listen to this chapter again. Because at its foundation, it's not just about negotiation. It is literally how you communicate with people. How do you understand like where they're coming from and change your approach to meet them where they're at? And it will help in every facet of your life when it comes to communication. I use it with people like sellers when I've talked to them. I use it with like personal relationships, employees, peers. Evelyn. All of those things, I think I've taken away things from that book and been able to apply it in terms of communications in all aspects of my life. And I think it puts a lot of the other like negotiation or sales books while they're all valuable, it puts them like on a totally different tier than this book for me. So I'm a huge fan of it.
I agree 1,000%. That Chris Voss, he has some major ninja tips in there. And, you get set in your ways when you do things, and you're like, oh, I got to make sure I do this. And, listening to this. And so I have gone through that book and like done it as like a textbook and try to write everything out to make sure that I am using these techniques, because you can get all the leads you want, but if you don't know how to communicate with that possible seller, it's never going to happen. So great book. Very good.
And that's where going through like on a textbook like level, going through it again and again, like how many people have read books that they were like, I was inspired by, I agree with that approach, and then just never executed it, or executed it 2 times and then forgot. You have to, when you find something like for me, this book or whatever it is, you have to come back to it. You have to repeat it. It is not about finding 1,000 things that you could execute. It's finding the few things that you do execute that make the biggest difference. And so for me, this book is like, just stands out time and time again to me as something that I always want to come back to. And every time I do it, I also find things I'm like, I've totally gotten away from that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and very smart to review that on occasion. So thank you. All right. The first A in badass is advice. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
This came from the agency I mentioned that I was at out of college. A guy named John Hall is the CEO and co-founder of that. He's since gone on to do a different company. Um, we were doing a session talking about how to go out, and for us it was about how to go network at events and like find business opportunity and drum up from a biz dev perspective. All of our business came from basically going to conferences, like not like booths and things like that, but like just networking while we were there, drumming up business and closing it. And I was like literally 22 at the time, selling to like entrepreneurs that were running 10, $20 million companies. Um, and I've always been a confident person, but there's, no matter how confident you are, there's an intimidating factor to doing that when you're just like, I've literally not achieved anything of note in my whole life. And so his advice in how he approached conferences and how he approached not just that, but networking and communicating to people in general was, it started with WWJD. So it was not what would Jesus do, not what would John do. This was like a slideshow. Literally, it sticks out in my mind every time. But what would the person who just doesn't give a fuck do?
Right.
And it really stood out to me because if you're in that scenario, it's not about not caring like about them as people or anything like that, but like, what would the person who just doesn't care if they're like embarrassed for a moment because they stumbled out of the gates and said something a little weird, or they just weren't confident talking to the most high profile successful person in the room, and you're like, oh, I don't care because like they might not like want to talk to me or anything like that. It's like, sure, maybe that's true, maybe they have their own problems and they're rude to people, but the person who just doesn't give a fuck doesn't care about that. They power through it. And what happens is when you take that approach, like for over even just like one event, like if you like, I noticed this immediately, like one conference, I might talk to like 20 the first time, and when I was that person just didn't give a fuck, it was like 100.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, yeah, not all 80 of the extra conversations went perfectly, but half of them did. And so now I have an extra 40 people that like we're talking to and like have a good relationship with. And even if nothing comes out of it, you break the ice. And then it's like most things, it's a muscle that you kind of like get better at over time. Where for me, the first few times I was going to events, I was a very active mindset. I had to tell myself, get myself in. And occasionally that still happens, especially when you enter a new room of people who are like that. But you get to the point where you just get very comfortable with like minor discomfortable scenarios and situations, and you power through it. And the results that come from that are just astronomical. Like 9 times out of 10, like you are the person that stands in your way of achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve. This mindset, I think, was really key for me to start getting past some of those limitations.
And in real estate, I always say real estate is based on relationships. And if you have that attitude of just not giving a fuck and going for it and doing it, I think is great advice for everybody listening to this one. So thank you for that. All right. The D in badass is drive. What drives Josh to be successful? This
is a very simple one for me, and it sounds crazy, but like just achieving difficult things that I enjoy doing. And it's broad for me because I have a lot of varied interests, like real estate, tech with DealMachine, like leadership, fitness, crypto NFTs, which I think we might talk about in a little bit. And so like it has to be broad for me because it's really that it's where I feel like I am like most happy and feel the most accomplished is it comes down to like when I've done something that's really, really difficult that I also enjoy that thing, that journey. Because there are certainly some things that I don't want to do everything. There's things that I'm like, that's a really difficult thing and I don't like it. Like I don't like being an expert in like tax accounting. Ugh. I don't want to do that. I want to pay someone to do that for me.
Yes.
I don't have any interest in being the expert at that. When I find something that's really difficult that I love doing, I love trying to take the approach of absolutely mastering that and figuring out what the roadblocks are, overcoming those, and just making it happen.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And yes, I agree 1,000 times, you know, pay that tax person to do it. Ugh. And that there's a perfect situation for, I don't give a fuck. So let somebody who knows what they're doing. So the next letter is the second A in badass, and it's aspiration. And you just touched on this because we talked about it briefly before the show, but what is a goal you are currently working on? I can't wait to hear about this because I am so stupid when it comes to this topic. So I hope you can educate me on this.
Yeah. So I'm very big into crypto, NFTs, Web3, and the future of what I believe will happen as a result of the existence of the blockchain, essentially. And it's just something I'm super passionate about. I've always been like a very tech heavy person, so I'll lean into it a little more aggressively than I think a lot of people. But because of that, I've kind of been I've been involved with it for like a decade now. But my involvement's basically been like talking to friends about it and like investing here and there. And
is this why you live in the tallest building in downtown Raleigh?
It is not. I rent at PNC technically. So I don't have the coolest condo there.
I am sure it's a pretty hefty rent because you live in the nicest building in downtown. So anyway,
it's not too, I felt it's not like cheap, but I felt good about it. I'll say.
Very good. All right, let's start with blockchain. Just explain what blockchain is.
Yep. So fundamentally a blockchain is what allows crypto to, it's the most secure way to create transactions that can ever exist. Bitcoin's obviously was the first blockchain. Like the guy that invented Bitcoin invented the blockchain, or guys or people, whoever that is. We don't really know. It's crazy that Satoshi Nakamoto is anonymous. Essentially, it's a way for a transaction to be officially on a ledger and never be able to be suppressed. And so blockchain literally is a chain of blocks. A block is like a segment of data, or typically in most cases, like here's a bunch of transactions that happened. Like I sent this person 1 Bitcoin. They sent me 0.2 Bitcoin, whatever it is. And so a block is like all of this data and transactions that happens. And then the chain is the sequential element of those blocks occurring over time. And the way the blockchain functions is like, depending on the chain, there's literally like hundreds now. They happen like every like 10 seconds. And you cannot undo a previous block in a chain. And so like a bank uses like a ledger to be like, how much money does this person have? And so in a way, like a blockchain works like a ledger, and this block of data is always showing that. It's always the fully up-to-date reflected version of that, and it can never undo a previous event. And so it makes this entirely safe mechanism that you cannot suppress it, you cannot undo it. It is fully going to execute when it occurs.
You cannot break the chain, basically.
You cannot break the chain. The one way that you could break the chain in theory is if you owned 51% of the computing power supporting the network, you could then go back and in theory rewrite it and say, well, my version of the blockchain is correct. And so what makes the blockchain secure is this element of the technology element. The other element is the fact that it's decentralized. And so there are quite literally millions of little validator nodes across the world supporting Bitcoin. And again, Web3 is like talking about Ethereum and other blockchains, but for Bitcoin's sake, there's like all these little nodes, and each of those are like one validator of the network transactions. They basically log the blocks as they happen. And so you would have to like, the only way to overcome it would be overpowering like literally millions and millions of validators. Essentially, it's impossible. Mathematically, it's like basically impossible.
Gotcha.
It's more secure than every database that's ever existed.
So you are getting ready to launch your podcast, and it's called Here for the Art. And It has to do with this industry, which again is so hard for me to wrap my brain around. But tell me what Here for the Art is going to be based on. Yep.
So it's an NFT cliche. So everyone by this point has seen like, oh, like this JPEG of a monkey sold for $500,000.
Right.
Those are NFTs. which in short just stands for it's a non-fungible token. So let's remove the art thing out of the equation. Let's take the monkey out of the equation. Really what an NFT is, and this is why I love its application in a larger context. An NFT is like, for the first time in human existence, we can say a specific person is an owner of a specific digital asset without fail, because it's logged on the blockchain. It literally, the blockchain says like, this person owns that thing, whatever that thing is. It's been most easily executed so far in the form of JPEGs. It's like, I am the owner of that art piece. So yeah, you may like copy and paste that art piece. Like, it doesn't matter. I am the actual documented owner of it. Like if you walked up into a house, you couldn't just say I'm the owner of it. The deed with the county says who's the owner is. Like, just because you're there, you're not the owner of it. And so in a digitally distributed way, an NFT is just saying I am the exclusive owner of that. Eventually, we will probably see in our lifetime, all of deeds are on a blockchain of some kind, and that they occur
for houses.
For houses, get switched to a blockchain, because then it's fully public data, which it already is, but then it's fully public and secured by a blockchain. And then you can see the transparency on like insurance and like change of title, and all of those things are fully transparent right on the blockchain and recorded there.
Josh,
and so
this is so hard for me to wrap my brain around. So if you are buying something on the blockchain with your Bitcoin, I'm trying, and now they're starting to introduce real estate. So how does it work with real estate? Like, are you actually owning a property, or is it the rights to that property?
Yeah, and it's the right answer is to be determined over time. Okay. Honestly,
I can handle this, because
the reality of what is occurring as we speak, laws will be rewritten. Laws will be applied to new technologies that they were not written for originally, and they don't know how it'll be applied directly. In a big picture case, the NFT ownership could just represent like the deed ownership, like with the county, and they could probably build a blockchain where that is like the only person that can update that version, for example, might be the county. So that's one way to secure it, and then it's done via a chain instead of everything that's currently done. A couple other ways that like this has already happened so far is there's something called a decentralized autonomous organization. This is a legal business entity. Wyoming did it like 3 or 4 years ago. That there's a LLC or some sort of business that is owned by tokens. And so you could do one token in theory, or you could do hundreds. And so in this scenario, maybe you've got an LLC that owns a rental property and you want to sell that rental property. Well, now instead of having to sell the business, instead of having to do a transaction with real estate people, you could just sell the token. The token is the documented owner of that LLC, which is the documented owner of that real estate asset. So now you're selling something as simple as like, I could sell you in 5 seconds, I could sell you a house on chain, and that's officially recorded immediately on the public records that no one can undo it.
And could I move into it right away?
In theory, yeah.
So it's a physical house.
Yeah, it's a physical house owned by a company and then that company is owned by whoever holds the NFT.
Okay.
And as soon as the NFT would switch to you as the owner, you would become the owner.
So this is going to be nuts in real estate.
It is going to be absolutely nuts. So here's some worlds to imagine when this is happening. The biggest first application is going to be more on a commercial fund level for big like apartment buildings. So when you're investing in like some sort of real estate organization that's doing like building an apartment building, you're like, I'm going to give you $100,000. I can't get my money back for 5 years. Like, you're building it, you're going to build it up, get it rented, and you're going to flip it out or refi.
And currently we call this syndication.
Yeah. Syndications.
Okay.
And so instead you could tokenize this process. And so what happens then is I can tokenize it, and without you, like the real estate business doing this, without them doing anything, I could resell that token to somebody else like that.
And not have to wait 5 years.
Interesting.
So
tokens are going to bring liquidity and immediacy to an industry that historically has taken a lot of time, like has been illiquid because you have to like go through a bunch of paperwork, a bunch of transactions and all this stuff. And it's going to be literally like, it doesn't even like the actual like syndicating organization, they don't even have to approve it. They can, like, you can just say, I own the token. And if they're going to distribute proceeds, they can distribute to the token holders. And someone could just be like, I want to buy your token. You can be like, great, I want to get out. I want to go use money for something else. And someone can come in and buy that immediately. And what's going to happen because of this is it's going to drive up prices of it, because now you no longer have to look at the 5-year opportunity cost of what could I do with that money if I had control of it. You're like, no, I can enter it, get short-term appreciation out of it, and then sell it if I wanted to. And so people are going to be more willing to pay a premium on like in syndications and things like that because of how fast it is to move in and out of it. Another thing that this is going to do, and this is where there's a lot of question marks, is how NFTs are treated as securities against, like, if you did a single family home against like a loan with an NFT. This is where there's going to be laws that people are going to intentionally do things where they're like, this is my interpretation of the law, and then the government's going to have a different interpretation, and it's going to be fought out in courts. That's like, people are doing that right now. There's Ryan Pineda is like a big like real estate guy.
I love me some Ryan Pineda. He's so cute.
he's great. I don't have a comment on the cuteness, but he's a really smart dude. He's actually doing an NFT project right now that's launching and minting in July called Tykes. And his whole goal is, I'm building a community of people who believe in, he's using the term digital real estate to represent everything that we're talking about. The fact is, like, the definitions are all over the place right now, and it's going to be like that for a while, but there's going to be a transition period over the next 5-10 years where this all happens. And so he's building a community with the Tykes that are essentially, it's going to be a mastermind for people trying to build in digital real estate.
Interesting.
And so again, it's going to have like the unique like art level aspect tied to a token, but the token actually represents membership in the mastermind. The token art is relatively meaningless. It's just the fact that it's an actual like membership in his organization, and he's doing a lot of creative things. He's throwing like, I think, everything at the wall and being like, I'm testing with Tykes. I know he's going to do digitizing of some of his, or not digitizing. He's basically going to make an Airbnb for his token holders. So your token holders are going to get a cryptocurrency for staking the NFT, and that cryptocurrency is going to be called like Tykes coin or something like that. And you'll be able to use your Tykes coin to like rent out one of his houses for a week. And so he's building like a mini Airbnb for that community as well.
So before we go on any further, because my brain is about to explode, and you did such a great job at explaining this to me and dumbing it down for me, and I truly appreciate this. Where does this come into with your podcast? Because I know you have this podcast that you're getting ready to release in July. So this is perfect timing. Tell us quickly about your podcast here.
Yes. So NFTs, like we said earlier, are really well known for like the JPEG element. That's why we got on that whole tangent there.
The first thing with NFTs for me was, I'm a huge John Lennon fan, and Julian Lennon sold an NFT, and I guess it was an image of one of his dad's jackets, I think.
Interesting.
Okay. So that's like the first thing I heard about NFTs, where I was like, ooh, John Lennon. What about John Lennon? Because I love collecting John Lennon stuff. So this is how I started getting involved in it. But
gotcha.
Keep going.
So
Sorry.
It's a great thing. Love collecting John Lennon. So that's a great thing to talk about with like this overlap of Here for the Art too, because it's actually a little bit tongue in cheek of why I've called it that, because a lot of people like over the last year have like day traded NFTs, and some people have made a lot of money at it. And people will be like, oh, like I'm just here for the art. And it's kind of like most people that come in and say that with pretty frequent regularity are like kind of like kidding themselves or kidding other people when they're actually trying to make money trading these NFTs. And so Here for the Art is kind of like a trope, like meme almost in the industry of like, oh, I'm just here for the art, when in reality, a lot of times they're here for the business, or they're making money at it. And so for me, I love the business of NFTs. The applications into what people call Web 2 and bringing it into Web 3 via something like an NFT is something that's really interesting to me. And so it's my attempt at a little tongue-in-cheek humor for more of the niche community, talking about Here for the Art and just calling it that.
Well, you are a great conversationalist. You're going to be amazing at podcasting. I just know that. So Yes. And
I appreciate that.
do you know when
Looking
it's going to be released?
I don't have the exact date. Late July is definitely when I expect to get it out. I wish I could give you the exact date. I'm trying to get enough recorded and ready to go so that I can hit a consistent stride out of the gates, and that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with the podcast. Listeners, make sure you check it out. All right, going back to my badass acronym here. The first S in badass is systems. What systems do you have in place to help you achieve success?
Yeah, this is a great question. Honestly, I've been one of my biggest flaws, I think, that I've realized, especially over time, is I historically have tried to brute force a lot of things where I just work really hard, work really long hours, and just consistently like get results from over effort, probably. And part of that's because I think where I've self-realized in the last couple of years in particular was like a lot of like really successful entrepreneurs I've spoken to. They're like, you've got this like visionary versus the operator side of an organization, and you need both really to get organizations to move forward. And I've kind of fully realized like I like fall on the visionary side. I don't say that with any pride. I always get a little hesitant to say that because I feel like you're trying to say you're Steve Jobs. Like I'm not saying I'm Steve Jobs, but I fall on the visionary side where like that's where I like spend most of my initial thought goes there. I spend most of my time there logically, unless I get like really disciplined and brute force it. And so because of that, I tend to have historically not been great at processing things out and building systems as much. And that was a massive flaw of mine, and continues to be like a default flaw that I try to be more disciplined about as I solution things. The thing that I've seen the most, my biggest focus in the last couple of years on that has been that my default, instead of solving a problem as it comes up or figuring out the answer to something, is thinking about who on the team needs to be involved to solve this problem and to make it better, versus like, what can I do to solve it immediately?
The who, not the how.
The who, not the how.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's been really, really helpful. I still need to improve there, and it's a goal of mine. And it really accomplishes two things. One, a lot of times they might do it better than me. Whatever, like they might just do the thing that needs to be done better than me. And instead of me solving it and doing a worse version of it, I go and find the right person that can help with it. And then two, it typically will make sure that it actually gets done and then documented and followed through on and built into a real process. So instead of like a prime example, recently we had one of our partners started sending a lot of his students to use our List Builder Elite product, which gives you unlimited leads through DealMachine. Well, there's a couple of caveats. So like you can only export a certain number of properties per day to like a CSV file. You can download it into DealMachine, but there's a limit on the export. And we didn't set the expectation well at the beginning of the conversation. It wasn't documented on this like specific checkout page we had made for him. Learning experience for us. And so instead of me hearing that feedback and then like just going to change that landing page and calling that customer, which all those things happened, I like sat down with like our head of customer success. And I was like, hey, like this was a problem. Like when we built this landing page, we didn't set the right expectation with this thing. The onboard experience has been a little bit bumpy, and like I want to make sure we do this better next time. And so now instead we have a whole process for creating a like self-service sign-up funnel for a partner that we follow and adhere to every time, with like checklists that you have to double check all of these things. You need double signature approval to launch that. And so it's like this whole process now where I know like I don't have to worry about it in the future, because like if someone does it, I'm like, just go to that spot and execute that process. And so that's an example of using the people to execute those things. And I think that can apply easily internally at a company. We're about 45-person company now at DealMachine. But also that applies to like, even if you're a one-person shop, like you don't have to figure everything out yourself. The reality is you need to go find the resources of the people that can help you and speed up your solutions faster.
The who, not the how. That's so important because a lot of times people will try to do everything in their business because they feel like they need to have control over it, or they're afraid to let go control of a situation. So awesome, great advice right there. Thank you for sharing that. And the final S in badass is success. What does success mean to Josh? Promo code Josh.
Promo code Josh. That's the success. The big, and this correlates earlier to kind of like what drives me to be successful. But I think success, like literally, is the consistent feeling of not feeling like days and time is wasted, doing things that I don't enjoy, pursuing things I don't want, and not focusing on ultimately like getting joy out of like what your activities in your life looks like. We get literally one shot at all of this. Like life happens once, and I think I've seen like close friends, acquaintances, peers, family members feel like that they had to do the things that were the path they were told was the right path, what they were told or what they thought, or like achieve a certain visual appearance that they thought was important, and it drives decision making that ultimately doesn't drive joy back to their lives. It drives stress, and it's not to say like I have plenty of very stressful days, but it is in pursuit of things I enjoy doing. And so it's, if you're not doing that, like what are you doing? Is kind of my approach like that. So that's what success means to me, is like I'm pursuing things that I enjoy, and not getting to a point that I feel like I've wasted days, time, and worrying about someone else's thought of what I should be doing with my time. And that on a moving forward basis, I'm continuing to pursue what it is I want to pursue. And again, the blockchain Web3 example is something that is an example of that. Like it's a big thing on top of DealMachine. Like honestly, I work the DealMachine hours, and we do our DealMachine stuff. And I spend a lot of hours right now outside of that now, like building that. But I enjoy it. But a lot of my friends don't understand it because their version of joy is like relaxing with their families, building a family, and those types of things, which is awesome. Again, it's pursuit of what you enjoy. And for me, it's like, I love like working and achieving things that are difficult. And that's when I feel like I'm in my element is when I'm doing that. And I honestly get like a little bit, like jittery if I'm not pursuing something that's meaningful, that I enjoy, and that I think matters. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is just not ever feeling like I've wasted days and time.
Well, this has definitely not been a waste of my day, because what an awesome chance meeting I had. Literally, you're sitting, feet from me, and I was joking with the wait staff at this restaurant called The Mecca. Shout out to The Mecca. You're going to be my Mecca mate, by the way. And
I've been there 4 times since then. It's across the street. Like I go there all the time.
I've been there twice already. So, I was joking with them saying, oh, this is my first time here. They're like, it's his first time here. And that's how we originally met. And this has been amazing. You just bring a lot of value to the listeners, and I appreciate you sharing your Josh promo code. And everyone who's listening, you definitely want to go check out DealMachine if this is something that you are interested in. It is such an amazing tool, and these features, the improvements you have done, are going to be so beneficial to everyone. So thank you so very much for sharing it. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you soon. I have Miss Mabel, my dog, so we got to get Mabel and Evelyn on a little play date sometime, I'm sure. So thank you, Josh, so very much. And that is all. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Now go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josie by visiting therealjenjosie.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.